Ukrainian officials say Russian forces have now entered the city of Sievierodonetsk after days of intense shelling. The eastern city has become the focus of Moscow's push to capture all of the Donbas region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said Russian bombs had destroyed almost all the city's critical infrastructure and damaged most buildings. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Zelenskyy made his first official visit outside of the capital to meet troops on the front line near Kharkhiv.
Assessing the damage with his own eyes, Ukraine's president visited the war-ravaged region of Kharkiv. Ukraine has pushed back the Russian offensive here, leaving behind ruins. In his first official trip out of Kyiv since the Russian invasion, Zelenskyy also met troops who've been fighting on the front lines.
I want to thank each of you for your service. You risk your life for all of us and for our state. Thank you for defending the independence of our country. Take care of yourselves. Glory to Ukraine.
Zelenskyy says Ukraine is doing everything to defend the country's east, where Russia is focusing its assault. Russia aims to capture the entire Donbas region, calling it an unconditional priority for the Kremlin. The fighting has made evacuating besieged towns across Donbas dangerous, but aid groups are working to bring the sick and injured out.
Most of them are wounded people who are evacuating from the hospitals in eastern regions which are not safe anymore, and we evacuate them to the hospitals in western Ukraine and Lviv, Ternopil and so on to protect them and to give them proper medical care.
In Sievierodonetsk, shelling has destroyed all critical infrastructure, and Russian troops are now storming the largest city still held by Kyiv in the Luhansk region of Donbas. Thousands of civilians are believed to still be in the city. The governor of Luhansk said the constant shelling makes it impossible to count casualties.
DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters is in Kyiv, and earlier I asked her whether Ukrainian forces are able to keep up morale in the face of the continued Russian aggression.
Well, on a whole, yes. I think across the country, civilians and in the military, morale is strong, and I think Ukraine still believes that it can win this battle. But at the moment, it's a bit of a lull because, Russia really are taking the upper hand in the battle for Donbas, as it's been dubbed. We've known for a few days now that they've had that upper hand, that they now have 95% of the Luhansk region. That's half of the Donbas. And they are pushing forward the fighting now in Sievierodonetsk, the last Ukrainian stronghold, the last Ukrainian city in that area. Fighting is now street by street. We're seeing about 200 shells an hour. So they've even stopped counting the casualties in that city and in that region at the moment, Gerhard. So it's a really dire situation down there. Of course, Sergei Lavrov reiterating that they're trying to liberate that region, but it's hard to see how the people down there who are living through this hell will be feeling very liberated at the moment.
Now, Ukraine apparently has launched a counter-offensive in the south towards the occupied city of Kherson. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, now Kherson was one of the first cities to fall to Russia. It was taken quite quickly at the beginning. People there have been living under occupation since almost the beginning of the conflict. Now you're seeing a counter-offensive by Ukraine. That's also, obviously to try and retake the territory, but also to try and thin out resources on the Russian side, try and thin out their troops and try and pull direction away from the Donbas a little bit as well. So that has taken place over the weekend, and they will, of course, be attempting to try and retake that area. That's something that President Zelenskyy has reiterated time and again. He said, warning Russia not to get too cozy in the places that they have taken, that Ukraine plans on taking everything that has been taken since the beginning of this conflict back, and that's certainly what they're attempting in Kherson.
Now, Zelenskyy, in an interview on Sunday, has said the duration of the war partly depends on support from the West. Is Ukraine getting the help it needs?
I think he's been even stronger than that in the past. I think it depends very much on the West, and particularly, of course, the weapons coming from the West. They've been calling, jumping up and down, really insisting that the international community support them more if they are to indeed halt the Russians or push them back, that they've seen a slowing down of the kind of weapons that they were seeing coming into the country, and that they desperately need them. And they're completely outweighed in the Donbas when it comes to heavy weapons. They really need those multi-rocket launchers that can go to distances of 200 or 300 kilometres in the distance. That's the kind of weaponry they need that they don't have, that the Russians do have, and that the Russians are using to completely annihilate those areas and win control. I mean, it's not being won sort of in a traditional on the battlefield style. It's really being won by the Russians using this heavy weaponry to pummel and completely destroy these areas. So Ukraine's saying without them, we're just not going to be able to stop the sheer force coming from the other side.
There's Rebecca Ritters in Kiev there for us. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm now joined by military analyst Frank Ledwidge. Frank, Russian artillery relentlessly pounding Sievierodonetsk. Why are Russian forces now focusing on this city?
Well, good morning, Gerhard. They've been after this city for 8 years or so since the start of this, or the first phase of the overall campaign in 2014. We mustn't forget there was a major battle around there then. And it's a continuation, I suppose, of those efforts. Also, there is, I mean, it's a major town. Don't forget that Lysychansk, which is right next door, is probably the next target. What's interesting with respect to the previous report and the likelihood or the possibility of Russia actually taking this is that Ukraine, it's not necessarily bad news for the Ukrainians this entirely. It does seem that they're not focusing on this as a last stand. And what they're doing is rather sensibly, looks to me anyway, as if they've withdrawn the bulk of their forces so as not to be surrounded in a cauldron there. So Sievierodonetsk, yeah, to be candid, I rather thought that it might be something of a fortress city, but rather sensibly the Ukrainians seem to be withdrawing from there and looking like they're willing to give it up without a sort of decisive fight there. We'll see, but that's how it looks to me.
Frank, do you think that Russia then is going to achieve its goal of capturing the whole Donbas region quite quickly?
No, I don't think they are. This is the point, as it were, of a salient, Sievierodonetsk. It's the town, I think none of us expected it not to be surrounded. What we might have expected is that the Ukrainians might sort of hold it a bit longer, and they may yet. But there's a lot more to go. We have the towns of Kramatorsk, of Slavyansk. Russians are still trying to push beyond Izium to the northwest. This campaign hasn't just started. It's the end of the beginning for the Donbas campaign. With respect to the Russians, though, it does seem as if they are looking, their objective is to take the Donbas, and we'll see if they leave it there. Lavrov said on Friday, I think, that the Donbas was the unconditional priority. So Russia's fixed its objectives there. And as you know, way back in March, that was what was explicitly said. We're focusing down because we diverted the Ukrainians up to the north and all that nonsense where they were defeated in Kiev, and we're going to focus on Donbas. And it does seem to be what they're doing now.
Do you see any progress for the Ukrainian elsewhere in the country?
I think in the medium term, what Ukraine will be focusing on doing, we do see that, as you heard before there, in the southwest. They may be looking at, I mean, this is a bit of a left field thing, but maybe looking at a strike on denying Odessa to the Ukrainians in some way. NATO's already mulling, I think, convoying vessels in and out of there. The Russians won't want that. They want to see Ukraine as a failed state, and the one way to do that is to seal them off from the sea. So I think we may see some pushes that way. Not in the next few weeks, but certainly later this year, I think.
Now, let's talk about heavy weapons a bit more, because it kind of dominates the political agenda in many Western countries. Ukraine still pleading for more heavy weapons from the West. How fast do they need to get there to actually make a difference?
Yesterday would be the answer to that, if one was being facetious or indeed accurate. The artillery that is received already is filtering through. The crews are being trained. The Pentagon reported over the weekend that probably 2/3, 90% or so maybe, of the crews have been trained. But look, it's a drop in the ocean of what they need. The report there focused there on artillery, on the artillery strikes, and Russia majors on artillery. And what Ukraine needs to do is knock out that artillery and deny Russia's supply lines. And as your reporter quite rightly said, they need heavy weapons, HIMARS, for example, MLRS, multi-launch rocket systems, as well as better anti-aircraft systems, because let's not forget the Russian Air Force is still a going concern. So they need that stuff, they need a lot of it, and they will need it over the summer without delay or prevarication, or they stand to lose the land and never regain it.
Military analyst Frank Ledwidge there talking to us from Oxford in the UK. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Fears of Russian aggression are spreading beyond Ukraine to the United States, where there's a boom in demand for private bunkers. DW's Ines Pohl has visited one of the largest bunker factories in the US, which is churning out luxury shelters to those who can afford them.
If you turn on the news, you see North Korea talking about nukes. You see Russia talking about nukes. You see China talking about nukes. I've never seen so many people talking about nuclear weapons in my lifetime. And it's scary. And that drives people to buy bunkers.
Ron Hubbard owns one of the biggest bunker building companies in the US. He founded Atlas Survival Shelter 11 years ago. The factory is based just 1 hour drive out of Dallas, Texas. These bunkers are not cheap. They average anywhere from $40,000 to $1 million.
Everybody's on board. No one thinks anybody's crazy for buying bomb shelters now. We have a good business right now in Ukraine and Poland because war is going on there. I have several Ukrainian customers, so there's wealthy people in Ukraine. They want to get a bunker as soon as they can, like immediately. We'll go in this one.
This is a standard 10-foot by 40-foot bunker starting at $200,000.
This is the new American trend. I sell millions of dollars of these every week. It's got a regular flushing toilet, vanity, granite counters. Look at these beautiful sliding doors. It has the underfloor storage here, so these will lift up. And all this down here is storage, and there's also water tanks that are built in, so he can keep all his food and supplies down here. And then, of course, the most important thing, the air would run through this carbon filter with the HEPA filter in it and would give you breathable air. And when this is furnished and everything's going, you just feel like you're in an apartment or flat.
Demand is not only growing in Eastern Europe, it's also exploding in the US, even though Ukraine is far away. Hubbard sees the reason behind that in the fear over violence in a country struggling with extreme inequality and polarization.
We're more worried about other Americans being hungry and starving and looting and robbing. That's our immediate concern. So people want a place where they can take their family, keep them comfortable, safe, and underground.
But who can actually afford that exclusive type of safety?
TV will be there. And you're thinking, what about the regular people? It's unfortunate, and it's not fair, but the elites, the wealthy, get to live a better life than the rest of us.